أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. Assalamu alaikum viewers. We are here with another episode of Quran and Science, and like we introduced our new set earlier, that due to the Ayyam-e-Azha, the Muharram al-Haram and the Safar al-Muzaffar, we will focus our discussion upon the various aspects of human behavior, how human psyche, how human behavior is affected by the various emotions, the chemical and biological changes within human brain, human body, and the effect of other elements on human beings. The purpose of this discussion is to understand the scenario of Karbala before, during and after Karbala, that is with the period of 60th Hijrah and 61st Hijrah, and the scenario in which the people behaved in a certain way towards the Imam of the time, the temperament of people and the reactions of the masses. And we will try to compare and find similarities and contrasts with the people of that time and the behavior towards the Imam of that time to us, to the people at present, including ourselves, and our duties and our reactions and our behavior towards the Imam of our time, Ajallahu Farajun. So in order to understand that, we are trying to take 1 to 2 emotions of human behavior which govern human behavior in each episode. Today we will discuss the obedience and conformities, which can also be called like peer pressure. I mean, how people behave, what governs or what pressurizes the human decision. As we all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human being, and He declared that this is the Ashraful Makhluqat, this is the superior most being. And although each and every one of Allah Ta'ala's creation is a wonderful piece of His creativity, of His azmat, of His superiority, of His might, but still Allah Ta'ala called the human being as the Ashraful Makhluqat. Of all the creatures which amaze us, which astonish us, which attract us, and which we are studying in depth, human being is still a big complex question. The research and the studies into human body, into human physiology, into the physical and in the physical structure of human being, of human body, is still not completely understood. The central processing unit of the human body is the brain. The brain is in itself far more complex organ than any other organ in human body. It seems it is very fragile. It's made up of neurons, and being so fragile, it has been placed in a skull, in a hard shell. Skull which is made up of flat pieces of bones which are set together like a jigsaw puzzle. And the mere structure of the brain is no less amazing. And in that small, compact brain, we are still learning more and more. Scientists have been trying to understand the workings of the human brain, or of how this small organ at the top of our bodies, it runs the human body, not just makes it physically movable, physically mobile, puts it into action, sends out the sensory and motor messages makes us behave and makes us move and act and hold and grip and climb and walk and run, but it makes us talk. And what is most amazing is that the fact, the particular thing that Allah Ta'ala took pride in it, and that was one nema Allah Ta'ala pointed out that is not given even to the angels: the power of decision. The power of decision also is placed in the brain. The brain, like I said in the beginning, is the CPU, to understand it very clearly. You know, it's the motherboard, it's the central processing unit which sees everything, which stores all the information, which stores all the data, which is received by the 5 receptors: eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch. All the 5 receptors, they collect data, and this brain, it stores up all the information, even the one which we are deliberately and intently not gathering, not paying attention to. It's amazing, because like apparently we are not listening to something carefully, apparently we are not looking at something very carefully, we are just passing by, we are just driving by, but anything that falls on the curtain of the eye, anything that falls on our retina, any image, it is stored in our brain. And the power of decision is placed in the part of the brain which is called the frontal lobe. It's placed right here at the forefront, at the forehead. Of course, like those who have studied science, and even those of my students who are studying biology and the human body in middle school, high schools, college levels, they all know, like, you know, the brain is not just one big thing. It is divided into various faculties, into various parts, which is responsible for various different purposes. So the part of the brain which takes action, which decides, which chooses, and based on the power of decision, based on the choice, and based what it wants to do, it also transgresses. It also shows humility, it also shows courtesy. And when we bring, like I said, that Islam is a holistic package. Quran is a holistic book. It contains everything. So all the ibadas, all the worships, all the types of worships, all the acts of worships, if we see even in some other religions also, we see that bowing down means that bowing your head down. And the rukun of ibadah, one of the parts of worships, that is prostration or sajda, in which a human being puts his forehead on the ground. And in our case, in the school in the school of Tashayyu, in the school of Ahlul Bayt, we have been instructed that the most recommended medium, or the most recommended place to do your sajda is on the bare ground. And there are conditions that it should be pure, it should be clean, it should not be filthy, it should not have any najasat, it should be clean, and preferably the khaki shifa, the khaki Karbala, hence the small clay tablet that we keep in our musalla. So, like I said, is the CPU, and it's very sensitive. Our brain contains every faculty. It like anybody who falls into coma, the whole body turns into a vegetative state. This is a common knowledge. Now everybody knows that. Even a layman understands that if the brain for some reason gets hurt or has some kind of goes through some kinds of kind of a shock and is injured or whatever, goes to sleep, coma, the body is in a state of sleep, cannot move, cannot even lift a finger. So imagine that something which has all the faculties, my sense of sight, my sense of hearing, my sense of speech, my power of speech, my sense of taste, my sense of touch, all my decisions, all my choices, all my yes and all my no's, all my ego. Yes, our ego is also here. And when we put this thing down on the ground and declare that Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdihi, that yes, Allah is the only one who's pure of all faults, who's devoid of all flaws, and He's the only one to which all praises should be directed. Subhana Rabbil A'la, He is the Allah, He is the most supreme. Not me, not I, not my will, not my wish, not what I want, not my ego. That is the essence, that is the whole philosophy behind putting our head in prostration. Why did Allah Ta'ala, in fact Allah Ta'ala did not prescribe it to all the other previous nations. Prostration is recorded to have, among human beings, it is recorded in history to have first been performed by David, Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam. And Allah Ta'ala loved it so much, He liked it so much, that it was one of his very favorite form of he liked it when his banda, when his abd, when his prophet, when somebody who was doing his ibadah, praising the Almighty. I'm talking about the earth. I'm not talking about the Anwar, because among the Anwar, of course, it was the Noor Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was the first Noor in the Noor form, in the form of light, who had done the sajda, who had done the prostration. But I'm talking about on the earth, among the human beings on the earth. So since then, it was one of Allah Ta'ala's most likable form, and then it became part of our namaz, it became part of our salah, that qiyam, ruku, bowing down halfway, and sujood, prostration. There is the whole philosophy in our namaz, what we do every day, 5 times a day, and in all 17 rakats. When we stand up, it is that it's called qiyam, and qiyam literally means to take a stand. When we take a stand, and when we read those du'as, when we read the Surah Fatiha, when we ask Allah Ta'ala for strength and for guidance and for keeping us safe from getting astray, from going astray, and to putting us on the right path, so we are also declaring that this is my qiyam, this is my stance. So I will take a stance against any evil, against any wrong. Then I'm bowing down halfway. That is that I'm conforming, I'm coming to a compromise, that I'm partially in control and I'm partially, there are things which are not in my control. So that's a compromise. Bowing down halfway is a form of compromise. That's yes, I surrender to some things which are out of my capacity, which are out of my control, and I will resist and I will try to strive and make effort against those things which I still can control, and to improve and to make them better. Sujood is the final surrender to the authority, to the supreme authority, that yes, things like life and death, I have no control over them. That is total surrender to the will of the Almighty. So this is the whole philosophy of life. But of course, mostly our salahs, our namaz is done in haste. They are done in too much hurry. Sometimes, like especially the daytime salahs, the dhuhr and the asr salahs, they are done in too much haste. That we are always in a rush. We are in the middle of a meeting, or we are rushing to the office. We have to go pick up the kids from school. We have so many other things to do. Evening time also sometimes. So. But this is the essence, this is the spirit of namaz. So that is why Allah Ta'ala chose the morning hours as His favorite hours, the Fajr hours, and as His favorite hours when it's peace, you wake up, pray to your Lord, connect. So today we were planning, we planned to discuss obedience. So yes, obedience. Allah Ta'ala speaks in Quran that وَاتِيُوا بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ وَاتِيُوا اللَّهَ وَاتِيُوا رَسُولُهُ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ, that obey Allah, obey your Prophet, and obey the ulil amr among you, obey the sahib amr among you, that is the aima, the other spiritual authority, the divine authority which has been appointed by the Almighty. And in some places, soon after these three authorities, Allah Ta'ala mentions the parents. Obedience to parents is mentioned at several places in Quran Majid, and it has paid great emphasis that obey your parents, droop down your shoulders, lower your gaze, lower your voice, stand like a slave in front of them. So why obedience? Well, to my young children, to my young viewers, I would say that to understand the obedience towards your parents and to understand the obedience towards Allah and to the Prophet, it's very simple that you go to school every day, you have to follow some rules, you have to follow some regulations, and to being at school, you don't argue any of them, you don't question any one of them. You just silently, quietly do whatever you're told. You don't even ask any questions that why do we have to do that? Why do we have to keep a bubble in our mouth? Why do we have to raise hands? Why do we have to walk on this particular stripe? We don't do that. But yes, we are more carefree. We are more at ease with our parents and everything. So sometimes we obey them, sometimes we don't. But obedience is to make the better person out of us, to keep us guided, to keep us on the guided path. And why the reason Allah Ta'ala has emphasized so much on obedience is because of His being Rahman Rahim, is because of His being merciful and benevolent. That Allah Ta'ala does not want any of His creature to end up getting punished, to end up in hell. Because basically He is Rahman Rahim. But He is also Adil. He also cannot let go the transgressors unpunished. And because He is Rahman Rahim, He cannot let go any zulm, any injustice, any oppression being carried out by one person or a group of people over others. It's against His adl, it's against His being Rahman Rahim. So that is why the first requisite or one of the first requisites is obedience, that you obey. So our ibadas is kind of a training or kind of an exercise towards obedience. Now obedience is very different when we see that for example, let's take us, let's take our community. We all know, we've been hearing it ever since we were born, ever since we could understand and learn to talk and learn the basic things in our lives as children. So these are one of the first things that we learned, that okay, you have to listen to your parents, you have to listen to your mom and dad, and listen to Allah Ta'ala. Okay, Allah Ta'ala is kind and merciful, but Allah Ta'ala can also be angry. He can also dislike a few things, and He can also punish. All right. But still, we do not take those kinds of obediences very seriously. we still transgress. We still try to find ways and to evade many instructions, many rules. Try to find out a way to avoid following them. But when it comes to the worldly instructions, some worldly obediences, we follow them more diligently. And the reason I'm discussing obedience today is that in the scenario of Karbala, we see that we saw different shades of obediences. The people who were with the Imam, yes, they were following that ayah, that Watiyullaha, Watiyu Rasul, wa ulil amr. That all those people who were with the Imam, they were obeying Allah, they were obeying the Rasul, and they were obeying the Imam of their time. So, though they got killed in the most brutal way, hungry, thirsty, oppressed, but still they were salvaged. They got the eternal salvation. But then we see that the other party, excuse me, they were also being obedient to their authority, to the authority which they feared more than Allah, apparently. Because all those who had reached the plain of Karbala and who were standing across the plain of Taf in front of the Imam, Sayyid Shuhada alayhi salam, he addressed them several times. He tried to reach out, he tried to talk them out of it. He gave lots of sermons. He tried to guide them. But somehow their obedience was ruled by fear. We spoke about fear. We spoke the differences and like how fear governs in our previous show last week. So I won't go deeper into it. But the fear of the apparent seems to be more profound, seems to have more strong an effect than the fear of the unseen. Like the words of Umar ibn Saad, that when Imam told him that whatever you've been promised, you're not even going to see it, you're not even going to smell it, you won't be able to even smell the grain of rye. But if you join me, okay, if you want the worldly wealth and riches, I'm going to give you more than you've been promised. But he did not believe. He believed, he trusted more in the apparent. And he said, okay, I'm going to kill you now and I'm going to ask for mercy and I'm going to apologize to Rasulullah afterwards on the day of judgment, as if it's possible. I mean, when I told it to my kids, many years ago, so even they laughed out. They said, what? I mean, that sounds absurd. It is. But this is how the people at that time, they behaved. So obedience is a factor. Like today, for example, if we study the different authority figures today, psychologists have actually studied this element of human behavior, the obedience, and what makes people, or what drives people into obedience. Excuse me, please. I'm sorry. And there have been many experiments and there have been many studies over the years, over the decades in fact, that what governs people's opinion, what decides or the final opinion and the final decision of the people. So what is the governing fact? Is it the fear only, or is it also the conformity? So again, in the scenario of Karbala and even today, we see that both the things are at play. At the moment, I would say that we don't have any apparent fear. We don't have anybody, any apparent fear of who's pulling us away from Imam. Like at that time, it was the Ibn Ziyad's threat and Yazid's threat. So at that time, okay, there were some evident fears of fearful personalities whom people had, knew that they are too brutal, they are too cruel, and they cannot, we can't be spared from them. But today we don't have that kind of apparent fear. But conformity is more what is driving us into going away towards the path of the Imam, towards doing the right thing, towards following the right path, or towards fulfilling the responsibilities, towards the waiting for our Imam. All right, so I'll share a few studies with you, a couple of stories with you. With respect to obedience, there have been some studies which were made, and one of the studies is a recent one comparatively. The recent study was done with respect to the prison of Abu Ghuraib. My children would not remember it, but in the beginning of the war on terror, and then in the beginning of the Iraq's occupation by the Allied forces, Abu Ghuraib was one of the prisons in Iraq, and it was highlighted due to the I would say the kind of due to the tortures which were conducted, which were systematically done to the prisoners, and more than the Guantanamo Bay prison is also one of the facilities, but like the Abu Ghuraib prison, it was there were some graphic images which were shared by the prison guards as kind of trophies, as kind of marks of what they did, as kind of some proofs of their achievements. The kind of tortures to which the prisoners were subjected to, it's difficult to describe them, and that is not our purpose. But then after it was all brought to notice, and the prison guards who were involved in those tortures, they actually went through screening, psychological screening. They also went through interrogation, and then after that there was an entire study done, because in such cases mostly the army or the police or the guards that are responsible for the prisoners, that are responsible for taking care of a group of people, containing them, into confining them, or into guarding them, they have often been noticed, they have often been studied to go beyond what is instructed to them. And when they are tried, when they are interrogated, they say, the first thing that they say is that they were only following orders. They were doing what they were told. And they were doing everything which was within the framework of rules they were given. So one of the studies that I'll share with you is called excuse me for a minute. It's called the Stanford Prison Experiment, and this was it's actually a very old experiment, but like the Abu Ghuraib prison study was also conducted on the same principles. And in the Stanford Prison Experiment, I'm sorry for some technical errors. I'm so sorry. Okay, The psychologist, it was conducted in 1971. The psychologist Philip Zimbardo, he tried to show that prison guards and convicts would tend to slip into predefined roles, behaving in a way that they thought was required, rather than using their own judgment and morals. So they were trying to show that what happened when all of the individuality and dignity was stripped away from a human, and their life was completely controlled by the prison guards. So it was the method devised was like there were 15, there was a group of people, they had placed an ad that this is what they want to do, and it was they constructed a mock correctional facility in the basement of the Stanford University, and like advertisements were placed in local newspapers offering $15 per day for the participants of this program. And of the 75 responses, the 24 male subjects judged to be most mentally and emotionally stable were selected, mainly middle class, whites. They were divided into two groups randomly of 12 prisoners and 12 guards. And they were briefed about their roles. The group selected to be the guards were outfitted in military-style, intimidating uniforms. They were also equipped with the wooden batons and mirror shades to prevent eye contact and make the guards appear less human. You know, the glasses with the reflectors, what we say today. In an initiating meeting, Zimbardo, the psychologist, who acted as the warden for the duration of the experiment, informed the guards that the only rule was that no physical punishment was allowed. Other than that, the guards were to run the prison as they saw fit and would be divided into regular working shifts and patterns. Prisoners, by contrast, were dressed in cheap smocks and were allowed no undergarments. They were to be addressed by and answered to identity numbers only. They also had a small chain around one ankle to remind them that they were inmates and in a correctional facility. So conditions were tough, with only basic sleeping mattresses and plain food being supplied. The prisoners were instructed to wait at home to be called for the start of the experiment. Their homes were raided without a warning, arrested by the real local police department, and charged with robbery. The local police had agreed to help with the experiment, and and they raided their houses, arrested them as they were real life prisoners. The prisoners, they were at their rights and had the mugshots, and they went through the whole process and everything. What was noticed, the results of the experiments were quite alarming. It was the experiment actually degenerated very quickly, and the dark and inhumane side of the human nature became apparent very quickly. The prisoners began to suffer a wide array of humiliations and punishments at the hands of the guards, and many began to show signs of mental and emotional distress. On the second day of the experiment, the prisoners organized a mass revolt and riot as a protest about the conditions. Guards worked extra hours and devised a strategy to break up and break down the riot using fire extinguishers. No prompt for this action was given by the psychologist, by Zimbardo. The guards used their own initiative to formulate the plan. Standard prisoner counts and roll calls became a trial of ordeal and ritual humiliation for the prisoners, with forced exercises and physical punishments becoming more and more common. Mattresses were confiscated from the prisoners and they were forced to sleep on cold, hard floors. Toilet facilities became a privilege instead of a basic human right, with access to the bathroom being frequently denied. The inmates often had to clean the toilet facilities with their bare hands. They were the prisoners also had to go through some serious humiliations and other kinds of intimidations, as long as the guards were not beating them. So, meaning to say that this, as I said earlier, as I read earlier, that it degenerated because the results were far more gross, far more graphic, and far more, beyond any expectations. The conclusions that were derived was that the individual personalities of people could be swamped when they were given positions of authority. Social and ideological factors also determine how both groups behaved, with individuals acting in a way that they thought was required rather than using their own judgment. Now, there's another interesting thing, like the prisoners also became, here in this case, in this experiment, they became more subdued. They tried to conform to the punishments. At one point, one of the prisoners had started to show signs of very serious emotional distress and was taken out. And it was replaced by a new, fresh person who soon after a day or two after being entered, he tried to break a strike, tried to gather the rest of the group and to have a strike or to kind of show some retaliation. To the surprise of the experimenters, the rest of the inmates who had been suffering for a longer time, they took the newcomer who was fresh and who was stronger and who was gathering them up and backing them up and pushing them into strengthening up against the guards. They looked at him as their enemy and they beat him up and they turned him over to the guards. So the thing which I want to bring up is that in the scenario of Karbala, when we hear the Masaib, when we hear the tragedies, and when we read and hear the way in which the soldiers of Ibn Ziyad and Yazid's army, Shimr and Sinan bin Anas, and we know only a few names, but there was a whole pack. The way they behaved, the way they tortured, the way they inflicted punishments and beatings and denied food and water and rest and comfort and everything, they were driven not by force, not by fear, but by greed. They understood that okay, these are the prisoners of somebody that the rulers hate a lot, and it was evident from all the proceedings, and it was very clear that Yazid and Ibn Ziyad, there were clear instructions that either Imam Hussein pledges his allegiance to Yazid, or he dies, he's killed. Don't spare him. Do whatever. So do whatever had no limits. They went to all the unspeakable, in fact they crossed all the limits in exercising the tortures on the women and children, that the power that is given by the blunt weapon, in their cases, like although they were using the blunt weapons on the women and children, on the ladies of the house of Ahlul Bayt and the children, but the lengths at which the human behavior can go to when derived or when directed into one particular way. Like in the beginning, in the first program of the series, I quoted one of the lines from Amir al-Mu'mineen's sermon 203. Which seems to be the basis of William James' studies in experimental psychology. Imam says that if you're not nice, I'm just quoting out of my memory. They may not be exact words, but the gist of it is that if you're not happy, then at least act to be so. Then when you are in a certain company, if you're not happy, then act to be so. Then after a while, you will become that. So that aspect has been supported greatly by the experimental psychologists, that given the circumstances and being in a certain circumstances, people often go beyond their initial instructions. If a person forgets the original obedience, like all those we see, all the army of Yazid, they were doing their namaz. And there are certain quotes, there are certain words of shimmer in the plain of Karbala at the time when he was about to take the head of Imam Mazloom. He is recorded to have said that I'm getting late for my Asr namaz, just hurry up. Just hurry up and take Imam's head, I'm getting late for my Asr namaz. So, meaning to say that obedience without a focus, without an understanding, without a proper understanding of who to obey and what to obey, without understanding the spirit, without understanding the essence, without realizing that what we are doing, if we are doing just a mechanical exercise. Because when they killed Hazrat Ali Akbar, they said Allahu Akbar. When they killed Qasim, they said Allahu Akbar. When they killed Abbas, they hailed Allahu Akbar. This is what we see today. The ISIS and the extremists of today, the followers of Yazid today, they are doing exactly the same. They are using the name of Islam. They are doing namaz very punctually. They are following all the principles, apparently principles of Islam. They are following namaz. They are doing everything. And every time they take any life, they hail Allahu Akbar. So, the instructions should be very clear. That Watiullaha, Watiu Rasul, wa ulil amr. That who are actually you obeying. Namaz or all our ibadats, they are not just mechanical exercise. If we do not take them as something that has a meaning, that has a purpose of doing so, it cannot bring about the kind of change in our personality. So in the plains of Karbala, on the Ashura, there were two groups, okay, one very small, one very large. They were both fighting. Apparently, they were both killing, they were both fighting. But there's a remarkable difference, which even after 1400 years, the critics and analysts from all over the world, from all different religions, from all different cultures, they all can very easily, very clearly distinguish who was right and who was wrong. Our discussion is not complete. We will continue the same discussion in our next program. Until then, I'll take a leave. Stay tuned. Wa akhiru dawana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.